Welcome to lab number 4, which is our first lab on the heart. So we're going to go over the gross anatomy of the heart, we're going to go over the microscopic anatomy of the heart. But in order to do that, we got to start first with some basics about blood flow. So we know that the heart is the pump, okay? The heart actually consists of 2 pumps. The heart has 4 chambers, and there's 2 pumps in there, all right? This chamber right here is the right atrium. It is a receiving chamber, okay? It receives the blood that's coming from the body. The blood flow within the body is called the systemic circuit. So blood feeding all your skin, your bone, your muscle, your digestive organs, etc. That blood is your systemic circuit. It is coming back to that right atrium. Notice it is colored blue to hint that it is deoxygenated. Now, of course, deoxygenated blood is not truly blue. It's more like a dark red, like what we have up here. So our right atrium is receiving that systemic chamber blood. Blood flows from the right atrium into the right ventricle. The right ventricle is one of our 2 pumps for our body. All right. Our right ventricle is going to pump blood to the lungs. So my right ventricle is pumping deoxygenated blood to my lungs. And this blood flow through my lungs is called my pulmonary circuit. Now, in the capillaries of the lungs, we are going to get rid of carbon dioxide and pick up oxygen. Hence the color change, blue to red here, dark red to scarlet red over here. So we pick up oxygen in our pulmonary circuit, and the blood from the lungs, the pulmonary circuit, returns to the left side of the heart, to the left atrium, which is another receiving chamber. And then blood flows down to the left ventricle, which is our second pump. And the left ventricle pumps blood into the systemic circuit, which is going to supply nice oxygenated blood to the rest of the body. So that is our basics of blood flow. All right. Over here we have a heart. Notice how the heart has a right atrium, receiving chamber for the systemic circuit. Whoops. Right ventricle, pumping chamber for the pulmonary circuit. Left atrium, receiving chamber for the pulmonary circuit. Left ventricle, pumping chamber for the systemic circuit. Those are our 4 chambers. Now, no matter what chamber we're looking at, if we zoom in on the heart wall, so a little square right there is us zooming in on the wall of the left atrium. We could zoom in anywhere, but we're just zooming in on the left atrium here. And when we do so, we notice that there are 3 layers to the heart wall. There is an outer layer called the epicardium, a middle layer called the myocardium, and then an inner layer called the endocardium. So epi, outside, cardium, heart; myo, muscle, cardium, heart; endo, inside, cardium, heart. Those are my 3 heart layers. If I look over here, my endocardium, let's start the endocardium. My endocardium is this gray right here. Okay, that is my endocardium. Simple squamous epithelium, a little bit of connective tissue in there. Then, my myocardium, that's the muscular layer of the heart. It is this middle layer right here. All right, this whole middle layer right here. The myocardium is made of muscle. Well, what kind of muscle? Cardiac muscle. Myocardium is made of cardiac muscle. The myocardium, because it's muscle, it can contract, it can squeeze and generate the power and pressure to move blood. The myocardium is always the thickest layer of the 3. No matter where I am in my heart, myocardium always wins. Now note how the ventricle myocardium is thicker and the left ventricle myocardium is thickest. More on that later. Now lastly, we got our epicardium, and our epicardium is this gray guy right here. Okay? Anytime you're looking at the outside of the heart, you're looking at epi. Anytime you're on the inside, you're looking at endo. Pay attention on an exam if the question uses the word layer. If the question uses the word layer, we are asking for one of these three. Okay, wonderful. Let's keep going. So what I'm doing here is I'm microscopically looking at the myocardium. Why am I looking at the myocardium of the three layers? Well, because it's really the most interesting. The myocardium is the power layer. It's the pumping layer. It is going to provide the force and the pressure to move blood. Now, this layer of myocardium is mainly made of cardiac muscle. So what I'm seeing here are cardiac muscle cells. This is a nucleus to a cardiac muscle cell. This is the cardiac muscle cell right here. There's another nucleus. Now, if you remember from A&P1, cardiac muscle and skeletal muscle are striated. So these lines here, dark reddish and lightish pinkish, these lines here are striations. Recall that striations occur because of the overlap of actin and myosin. So right in here, all these lines are striations. Okay? But they're not the only thing we can see. We can also see these things called intercalated discs. And so I want to point out an intercalated disc. There is one right there, that reddish line right there. Here's another one right here, another one right here. Can you find any more? You should be able to find at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I see 13. If I move this guy, I see 13. If I counted right. So intercalated discs. The word intercalated basically means stuck in between. And intercalated discs are between cardiac muscle cells. So here's a cardiac muscle cell right here. Here's a cardiac muscle cell right here. An intercalated disc is between them. Okay? So if I find an intercalated disc, I'm going to have two cardiac muscle cells, one on each side. Now, why do we put things in between cells? Well, a really simple and logical answer is we put things in between cells to join them together. And in fact, in my intercalated discs, I'm going to find two structures, desmosomes and gap junctions. They're both going to join cardiac muscle cells together, but they do it in different ways. Desmosomes are going to mechanically, physically bind cardiac muscle cells to each other. So there's a physical connection. Gap junctions are going to electrically join cardiac muscle cells together. So desmosomes are basically going to prevent those cardiac muscle cells from coming apart. Gap junctions perform a really crucial thing. Gap junctions are going to allow, they're going to allow synchronized, I'm just going to write sync, you know it stands for synchronized, depolarization. So synchronized depolarization. Gap junctions let my cardiac muscle cells depolarize together. Now, what's the point of that? The point of that, if you synchronize depolarization, you're going to synchronize something else. If you remember back from A&P1, think back fondly on your time there. After a muscle cell depolarizes, the next thing it is going to do, it is going to contract. So gap junctions allow my muscle cells in my heart, my cardiac muscle cells, to depolarize together, which then makes sure that they contract together. And that's the only way we can get these millions of cells to generate the pressure and the force to move blood. Now, because of the gap junctions, the heart is referred to as a functional syncytium. functional. Think about the word function here. This means the heart is going to function. I'm going to write heart. The heart functions as one big unit. Syncytium, it's a weird pronunciation, I know, syncytium. Syn means together, cytium means cell. So cells are functioning together. The heart is functioning, is acting as one big unit rather than millions of disparate cells. And this goes along with something called the all or none law of the heart. So either all the cells are going to contract or they're not. None of them. All right. On that note, I believe that is it for our things in cardiac muscle. So let's keep on moving. And yep, I was going. I thought I went backwards for some reason. We did this already, didn't we? We're going to go through all these chambers and see what's inside them and outside them. All right, so we're going to start with our right atrium. The right atrium is right here. There's more of it on the back. All right, this is my right atrium. The right atrium was a receiving chamber, right? What kind of blood did it receive? It received deoxygenated blood. From what circuit? What circuit was it? It was the systemic circuit. All right, so that's the job of it. Structurally speaking, there is this wrinkly region right here. You see this wrinkly region? It's like a little flap. And this wrinkly region is called the auricle. So this is our right auricle. You can notice one on the left as well. The word auricle means little ear. That's a terrible ear drawing right there. Let's get rid of that. So someone thought it looked like a little ear. That's what the word auricle means. The auricle is this structure that can expand. So why would you want this to expand? I'm going to take a guess that you are sitting down right now. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're walking. Maybe you're doing something else. Maybe you're driving and watching this. I don't know. That's not safe. But what I want you to do is, if you're sitting down, think about where a lot of your blood is. A lot of your blood is pooling in your legs, in your thighs, in your butt. If you get up and start moving, that blood in those veins in those regions is going to start moving back to your heart. So your right atrium, which is the receiving chamber, needs to be able to expand a little bit. All right, what else do we got going on here? We have two blood vessels, a superior and an inferior vena cava. Vena means vein, cava means big. Superior and inferior, you know those terms. Here is our superior vena cava right here. Here is our inferior vena cava right here. These two guys are returning deoxygenated blood to the heart from the systemic circuit. The superior vena cava taking blood from basically things above the heart, the inferior vena cava taking blood from basically things below the heart. Okay, good. Let's get rid of that. Let's spin this thing around. So I'm looking at the back now. All right, in the back, here's my right atrium in the back. I do not have my auricle back here, but there is my right atrium in the back. I do see my superior vena cava right here. I also see my inferior vena cava right here. Remember, deoxygenated blood from the systemic circuit above the heart goes back to the heart via this guy, the superior vena cava. Deoxygenated blood from the systemic circuit from structures below the heart goes back to this guy right here, back to that right atrium. Now in this view, I see another blood vessel called the coronary sinus. It's right there. The coronary sinus is this blood vessel right here. A sinus, I know you meant sinuses in like the skull. Sinus was a cavity within a bone. This is a new definition for the word sinus. This is the kind of thing we do in anatomy class. We give like multiple definitions for the same word. A sinus is also a thin-walled vein. And this guy right here is the coronary sinus. What I want you to notice is these other coronary veins that are all emptying into it. All these coronary veins here are emptying into the coronary sinus. So the coronary sinus collects blood from the heart wall itself. The heart is working hard. Think about that myocardium doing the contraction. It has its own blood supply that needs to be drained. And that's the job of the coronary sinus, which is this guy right here. He's actually going this way to empty into the right atrium. Okay, that is it for my exterior right atrium structures. Now what I've done is I've cut this heart open. This is a frontal section, so I still see the right side and the left side. And this is my right atrium up here. Now inside my right atrium, I see some little wrinkles of muscle. You can see like some right in here. You can see these little guys. I'm just going to put some dots on them. Those are all little wrinkles of muscle on the inside, and they are called pectinate muscles. Pectinate means like it has been combed. Think about like if you took a rake in some sand and you rake the sand, you would leave all these little lines and ridges. That's the idea here. So those are my pectinate muscles. Now, there is actually a wall right here. Okay, there is a wall between the right atrium and the left atrium because we got two different kinds of blood and we cannot have them mixing. That wall where I put an X is called my interatrial septum. Septum is a wall between the atria. Interatrial septum. Now, in this wall, there is a dent. I'm going to put a little circle around that dent. In this wall is a dent. That dent is called the fossa. Remember fossa from AMP1 were like depressions? So a fossa is a depression or a dent, and it's kind of roundish, so it's the fossa ovalis. This is the remnant of a hole. You used to have a hole in your heart between your atria. That hole was called the foramen, another word from AMP1, means hole. That hole was called the foramen ovale. The foramen ovale. So in your interatrial septum, there is a dent called the fossa ovalis. It used to be a hole called the foramen ovale, and you had that hole when you were just a fetus. You had that hole when you were just a fetus. Let me clear this stuff out here, and let me see real quick. Nope. I want to know if I had a picture of a foramen ovale. I couldn't remember. I don't. So let's talk about why you have a foramen ovale when you were a fetus. All right, when you were a fetus, where were you? Where were you? So when you're a fetus, of course, you are chilling in mom's uterus. And you are not breathing air in and out of your lungs, are you? Your lungs are filled with amniotic fluid. You might make some breathing movements, but you're not really breathing, and you're not doing gas exchange in your lungs. So no gas exchange in your lungs. Where is gas exchange happening for the fetus? It's happening at the placenta, but not in the lungs. So because you're not doing gas exchange in the lungs, you don't want to send blood to the lungs. You don't want to send blood to the lungs because you're not doing any gas exchange there, and you don't want to send high pressure blood there. It could be damaging, it could be a waste of energy. So when the blood comes in the vena cava, superior and inferior, when the blood comes in here, instead of going down like normally to the right ventricle, the blood, at least most of it, it's not 100%, most of the blood is going to zip through from the right atrium to the left atrium through the hole that is here. And that hole is called the foraminal valley. Now, of course, when you're born, you start breathing. And when you start breathing, you actually slam a valve on that hole shut. And within like 24, 48 hours, that hole has I can't talk right now. That valve has had new tissue grow over it, and that hole has now become a depression. All right. And the depression is called the fossa ovalis. Okay, that took a while. Let's go back to the adult heart. Let's get rid of all this stuff. There we go. So this is my right atrium up here. This is my right ventricle right down here. There is a hole between them. The opening right here between them is called the tricuspid orifice. It is named after the valve. This guy right here is one of the 3 flaps of the tricuspid valve. Valves, their job is always to prevent backflow of blood. Valves prevent backflow. I'm abbreviating BF for backflow. Don't do that in your test. So valves prevent backflow. In this case, preventing backflow from the right ventricle to the right atrium. So there's my tricuspid valve. We'll talk more about it in a moment when we get on to the ventricle. There's my tricuspid orifice right there in my right atrium with my fossa ovalis, my pectinate muscles, my superior and my inferior vena cava. All right, one chamber done. Let's keep going. If we pop down to the right ventricle, let's look at it from the outside first. So my right ventricle is on the outside, basically like right here. There's my right ventricle. And if I look on the back side, there's my right ventricle right there. The right ventricle is, of course, a pump. It pumps deoxygenated blood to the pulmonary circuit, and it pumps that deoxygenated blood into a big artery called the pulmonary trunk, which we see right here. So there's our pulmonary trunk. A trunk is often artery is referred to as a trunk, oftentimes if it is short and wide. So your pulmonary trunk is right there. Your pulmonary trunk is going to split into a left pulmonary artery and a right pulmonary artery, which are going to your lungs. These 3 guys here are weird arteries because they're deoxygenated. All right, let's keep on going. Let's cut open this right ventricle. There we go. We've cut open the right ventricle. Here it is right here. I want you to notice the left ventricle over here. There is this big wall. I should probably turn my drawing tool on. There is this big wall between them. This big wall between the 2 ventricles is called the interventricular septum. Extends down towards the apex of the heart there. Probably should have mentioned him earlier. There's the apex of the heart. There's the interventricular septum right there. It prevents blood from mixing between the right and left ventricles. We had an interatrial septum up here, interventricular down here. Okay, a moment ago, we talked about that tricuspid orifice, which is the opening between the right atrium and right ventricle. Then there's also the tricuspid valve. Here is a valve flap right here. Here's another one. There are going to be 3 in total. Tricuspid valve is going to prevent backflow from the right ventricle to the right atrium. It doesn't let blood flow backwards. Now, from an engineering standpoint, it's not like, it's got a fault. So right where I'm writing here, it's almost like this valve is hinged. And what that means is that it is possible the valve could just flip up. So if the valve is hanging down, when it closes, you want it to be kind of like straight, so you've shut off that. But the valve theoretically could flip up. And I don't want that to happen. So what we've got are these collagenous strings called chordae tendineae that anchor the valve flaps to these muscles that are called papillary muscles. So these bulging muscles here are papillary muscles. The strings that they're attached to are chordae tendineae, and they prevent the valve flap from opening the wrong way, which has a word when the valve flap goes the wrong way that is called prolapse. And if it happens, the valve ain't working and blood is going to go backwards. Okay, couple more things in this right ventricle. We have some other muscles. We've got these other ridges of muscles. I'm going to put an arrow on one here. Here's some more ridges like in the lining. All of these guys that don't have the strings attached to them, don't have the chordae tendineae attached to them, those guys are known as trabeculae, which means ridges, carnii, which means meat or flesh. So they are just other musculature structures, and of course muscle contributes to the power and the pumping force. All right, we know that the right ventricle is the pump to the pulmonary circuit. We met this guy. He was the pulmonary trunk. This guy was our, left pulmonary artery, and this guy over here was our right pulmonary artery. We met them already. There is a valve at the base of the pulmonary trunk called the pulmonary semilunar valve. Because it is a valve, what's it going to do? It is going to prevent backflow, and in this case it's preventing backflow from the pulmonary trunk to the right ventricle. Notice it has no chordae tendineae attached to it, no associated papillary muscles. There is no hinge in it. It's called a pocket valve. Ask your instructor in class to explain that in a little more detail. Okay. Woo! Working hard here. It's almost half an hour in. This is going to be a long one. All right. So let's keep going. Let's talk about that left atrium now. Left atrium is sitting up here. There's the left atrium. It is the receiving chamber for that pulmonary circuit. So it's getting oxygenated blood. The wrinkly flappies are our left auricle, which allow for expansion. Now going into the lungs, there are two pulmonary veins on each side. So over here I have a left superior and a left inferior pulmonary vein. Over here I have a right superior and a right inferior pulmonary vein. They're taking oxygenated blood from the lungs back to the left atrium. They are weird veins in that they are oxygenated. All right. If we flip this guy around, we can see the left atrium. The left atrium is basically like this whole guy right here. Bum, bum, bum. There's our left atrium. And in that left atrium, we can see a little bit of our flappy, wrinkly friend, and that is the left auricle over there. And I'm going to see my left superior, my left inferior pulmonary vein, my right superior, and my right inferior pulmonary vein as well. So I can see all those nice pulmonary veins. So that's pretty much it for the outside. Now let's look on the inside. On the inside, I don't see them in this picture, but there are pectinate muscles. There is an interatrial septum. It's hard to see because it's hidden by the pulmonary trunk in the aorta here. There is a fossa ovalis. I can't see it in this view as well, but it exists. These are things we had on the right. We also have them on the left. The hole right here between the left atrium and left ventricle, which is down here, that hole is called the bicuspid or mitral orifice. It is named after this valve. This is the bicuspid or the mitral valve. Bicuspid because it has two flaps. Mitral because, like, back in the day, a bishop would wear like this hat that looked kind of like that. And so someone thought the valve looked like his hat, so they called it a mitral valve. All right, that's it for our left atrium. Let's drop down into the left ventricle, and we're going to meet a lot of things we've met already. There's my interventricular septum right here, which prevents the mixing of blood between the two ventricles. Here is my bicuspid or mitral orifice, and here is my valve flaps right there for my bicuspid or mitral valve. It is also a hinge valve, so it needs the strings of collagen, which are called chordae tendineae, and it needs to anchor them on these bulging muscles, which are papillary muscles. We also have other little ridges of muscle as well. Any ridge without a chordae tendineae attached to it is one of those trabeculae carneae. Now, my left ventricle, it is a pump. The left ventricle is going to pump blood to the systemic circuit. There's no backflow because of that bicuspid or mitral valve, which doesn't prolapse because of these guys down here, chordae tendineae, papillary muscles. Now, the first artery that gets the blood from the left ventricle is the aorta. We see the aorta right here. This part of the aorta that's kind of like tucked behind the pulmonary trunk and going up is called the ascending aorta. Then this part where it curves, that is your aortic arch. And then if we could see it, the aorta would descend. It goes down like all the way to around your belly button area. And that's your descending aorta. So they are going to get blood. This aorta is going to get blood from that left ventricle. Now, I can see a little snippet of it right here. That is my aortic semilunar valve, which stops blood from going backwards from my aorta into my left ventricle. On that note, I think we're done with this left ventricle for now. Let's keep on going. And let's talk about some other arteries and some veins. So here's my aorta up here, okay? There's my ascending aorta where I'm dancing my cursor on right there. Coming off the ascending aorta are a pair of arteries. There is a right and there is a left. Oh, it's kind of a bad drawing right there. And a left coronary artery. Let's put it right there. There we go. The right and left coronary arteries are basically going to feed the right and left sides of the heart, more or less. Now, coming off the left coronary artery is this guy, which is coming down the middle of the heart. He's like just on the outside of the septum between the ventricles. So this guy is called your anterior interventricular artery. So he's going to help feed primarily that left ventricle. Next to him is a little guy, a blue guy. I don't like that color. Let's make him green. A blue guy, which I'm just putting some dots on. That blue guy right there is the great cardiac vein. All right, so he's going to help drain that anterior heart. So we have some of the heart's own blood supply that we're seeing here. If we spin this guy around, we're going to see some other vessels, including a posterior interventricular artery, the red guy right there. Let me draw it better. Oh, I should use the arrow tool, shouldn't I? Boom, right there. There's my posterior interventricular artery. I'm also going to see a vessel called my small cardiac vein and a vein called my middle cardiac vein. And they are emptying into my coronary sinus, which is right there. So we can see several of the blood vessels that are supplying and draining the wall of the heart itself. Okay, we're almost done, guys. Almost done. We also have to notice that our aortic arch, which is up here, remember ascending aorta coming out of the left ventricle, aortic arch right here has 3 branches. The first branch is called the brachiocephalic artery. The second branch is called the left common carotid artery. Then the third branch, notice they're in alphabetical order here, is the left subclavian artery. The brachiocephalic actually splits into a right-hand version of these two guys. So like if we kept going up this brachiocephalic, we'd see a right common carotid and a right subclavian. The common carotids go up in your neck, taking blood to your head and brain. The subclavians go out under your clavicles. That's what subclavian means, going towards your shoulders and your arms. So you got some nice branches of our aortic arch there, which is really good. And just to kind of review, here I do have a picture with a foramen ovale. So this is a fetal heart here. So blood in the fetal heart would arrive from the superior vena cava and from the inferior vena cava, and then most of the blood would go this way to the left atrium. A little bit does like trickle down here, but like 85% of it goes across to the left atrium through the foramen ovale. You can see how there's kind of like a flap situation already, and shortly after birth this flap slams shut, grows over, and it becomes that depression we mentioned a long time ago, the fossa ovalis. Okay, let's keep on going. We're almost done, guys. All right. We got a fetal circulation over here, okay? Adults over, not adult, but post birth over here. Practically adult. So blood is coming in the superior vena cava, the inferior vena cava, and most of the blood is shooting through that foramen ovale to get over into the left atrium. Meanwhile, a little bit of blood, like 15%, goes down to the right ventricle and goes into the pulmonary trunk. Now here's where we got something else to pay attention to. There is actually a connection between the pulmonary trunk and the aorta. There's a blood vessel between them that you have in the fetus, but you don't have in the adult. It's called the ductus arteriosus. And it provides a second way to skip the lungs because the fetus is not doing gas exchange there. So whatever blood didn't go through the foramen ovale, whatever blood goes down into the right ventricle, most of it is going to be pushed up into that ductus arteriosus, into that aorta, into the aortic arch. Now, the ductus arteriosus, shortly after birth, it is going to squeeze really tight. It's got muscle in it. It squeezes really powerfully, and it shuts itself down, closes itself, and it turns into a tube, which persists in the adult, and that adult tube is called the ligamentum arteriosum. It's that thing right there. So we have two structures in our adult heart, the fossa ovalis and the ligamentum arteriosum, that were remnants of fetal structures, the foramen ovale and the ductus arteriosus. All right. Fantastic. If we look on this picture here, this might be our last one. Yes, it's the last one. Long session today. This guy right here, you see that little thing right there? That little guy right there, that is the ligamentum arteriosum on my heart picture here. And folks, we are done. If you stayed for all 39 minutes, 40 minutes of this video, then thank you. If you see me in the hallway, let me know you watched the whole heart video. I'll be glad. Some people, tap out after like 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes. So if you watched the whole thing, good for you. Let me know, and I will see you next time. Bye.